Following podcast is brought to you by The Man Who Watched Batman Volume 1. The Man Who Watched Batman is the ultimate companion book to Batman the Animated Series. Whether you can quote every line or are watching for the very first time, this novel will leave no stone unturned, give you the ultimate BTAS experience. Every single episode, character, plot twist, reinterpretation, melody, and metaphor, this academic and critical analysis is unlike anything you'll find on shelves. This isn't just plot summaries and fun facts from the internet. This is a personal, yet professional commentary on the greatest animated show of all time. If you would like to find a copy, you can check us out at createspace.com. Just look up The Man Who Watched Batman. Or you can find us on Amazon, same tag. Or look us up on the internet at facebook.com/deadmeninc. Well, hello to everyone who's listening right now, hopefully more than 3 people. I am here, my name is Ken Johnson, and this is my roommate Travis, and we're taking a crack at our first in what we hope to be a series of podcasts. We are roommates. A little background about ourselves. I am a film school graduate of Compass College Cinematic Arts with a specialized background in film history, and I work for a media company that I have founded that strives towards getting animation and entertainment in general more involved with education. And my roommate really loves Disney movies.
That's it. Look at me. I have a company and I'm doing things. And look at me. I like Disney movies.
Well, by all means, Travis, go ahead and extrapolate upon yourself.
I really like Disney movies.
See, now don't you feel so much better about yourself?
Yeah, I feel great.
So anyways, when we first came up with the idea for this podcast, one thing led to another, but for whatever reason, the topic that came up for us to do first was Disney movies. As obviously Disney movies contain a very large piece of the nostalgia of a lot of us. And me and my roommate happen to have a very good knack for dissecting the tiny little really cool things out of a lot of these projects. There's also a lot of them that kind of slip through the cracks and people forget about. So what we thought we'd do is we're going to kind of take a crack looking back through a lot of these older Disney films, and we're going to hit every single one. We're going to hit the ones we feel like we got something to talk about, and we'll see what we can find. I think a good place to start out from what we can remember is, although it's not the first Disney film, one of the most famous of the early Disney films was the original film Steamboat Willie, which is the first ever appearance of the character Mickey Mouse for a lot of people. And it's often, even to this day, they actually, as much as they use Mickey as a mascot for themselves, they're still using Steamboat Willie specifically.
Yeah,
as a mascot for themselves.
Yeah, like you always see the opening. It's the one everyone thinks about when you think classic Disney and more Mickey. Like the shorts, I mean.
Absolutely.
It's the one you think about.
And the thing that I find so fascinating about it is not only it is one of those things where the culture of it lasts longer than the cartoon itself, but it's amazing how well the cartoon does stand up on its own after that. There's 8-year-old kids today that they might not know what it's from, but you can still hear them whistling which actually when I say it out loud sounds like the theme of a 90s 8-bit platformer, but maybe that's just me.
Just you.
But when you actually look at the cartoon itself, I'm still very much entertained by it.
It's still a great cartoon. It's still full of whimsy. It's fun. It's super little humor. It's just great.
It's the first time we saw Peg Leg Pete, and that was really cool. It's definitely one of those, it's on like every single site you can find. It's not some hidden gem that's impossible to see or whatever. It's a 5-minute trip away from your computer right now. So when you get done with this podcast, I highly recommend you check it out if you're one of those people that hasn't seen this particular film.
If you've not seen it, it's everywhere. It's just too fun to see. It's just, Yeah.
It literally is everywhere. I mean, we went to see Wreck-It Ralph when it came out like 2 or 3 years ago, and even in that film, they did the 8-bit opening of Steamboat Willie when they were doing the Walt Disney logo, and they were like, and I was just like, this is like so retro on so many levels, because like I can't take it. They're embracing 2 different nostalgias at the same time. It's like an evil plot to just like, well, far be it from Disney to exploit nostalgia. I mean,
what? No. I never do that.
Trying to think of some of the other of the shorts back then. One of them I always remember. This is actually what I would consider to be one of my favorites. Is the main thing that they got right with the shorts is the same thing you see in like Fantasia or in Tom and Jerry cartoons and a lot of things like that, is the idea that you had orchestras doing all of the sound effects for pieces. Which, if you've ever seen a piece of that sheet music for one of those cartoons, it is one of the most insane things you'd ever see. And sometimes they would do the Fantasia-like pieces, where they would take an already previously made piece of music and they would animate on top of it, without altering the music. And the one that always got me was the one where Mickey is conducting the orchestra, and they're playing The Storm, and he looks at the piece of music, and it's just this crazy mess. But Mickey's like, I got this, and he pulls his sleeves up. And it's like, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they go for it, and this hurricane comes out of nowhere, and he's like, no, we must finish this song! And then, like, the flute player is, like, playing their butt off and, like, getting swept away into the winds, and, like, it's just madness. I mean, like, in and of itself, it is still just a cartoon about a bunch of different animals playing a piece of music. Nothing else really happens in this cartoon outside of just antics with wind and music. It's literally all it is. But it's still, like, just so ingrained in my mind.
Yeah, that's what the best things about them were. Like, just, they could just take anything and just do it fun, a little whimsy, bunch of classic, classical music in the background, and they just make it amazing.
I think in general that's one of the main things that made Disney big in the first place. Because, I mean, it's, especially for kids this newer generation, it's a lot easier when you think about Disney in general to think more about Disney as a company, Disney as a brand, as an overarching entertainment mogul. But when we're talking about this older stuff, I think that's kind of cool is we get to go back and talk about Walt. And, like, Walt was the man when it came to a lot of these things. Like, you hear people saying, there's comedians that can read the phone book and make it funny. Walt was the guy that could take any storybook ever made and make it a hit. Walt seemed to understand, as old as he was, just what it meant to be a kid. And I think that's what transformed into so much of his work into things. Because in general, if I had to come up with one thing that makes the entirety of Disney work, which is a good thing to establish when we're about to talk about Disney for the next X amount of minutes, is Disney is about looking back. It's not about going back, and it's very specific. It's about looking back. It's about capturing that feeling of being a kid. So that because there is no other person back then who could really embrace the idea of just even children's media in general. I mean, technically speaking, cartoons weren't designed specifically for kids back then, just because it was a medium where they were still competing very much for money. This was a higher art thing, and you don't advertise high art to 10-year-olds. But even in how he made these, there was definitely a sense of the feeling of being a kid in mind.
Yeah, all of them. All of them have the not just the kids feeling, it's the family feeling. Which is much way better than just like, people are like, it's just kids. No, they're family movies. There's much for everyone. Everyone can sit down and watch, Aladdin, Lion King, or them, and watch it, and it's great. There's enough for that. Even the classic old Pinocchio has that. That has like so many things in there, and just it's not just kids. It's not just happy. Okay, the cartoons are just little fun stuff. The shorts are, but
yes.
They were more. But...
Very brief bit of history that puts us in somewhat of perspective. Walt did have competition back in his day. That is very clear. That's not to say that he didn't kick butt in what he did, but he wasn't unopposed. There were some other people working with him. But as far as like Disney as a separate studio from everyone going around, Disney was a tiny, tiny little speck of a company compared to the people that owned literally like 95% of the movie industry. But Walt, as a person, as many people have talked about him in interviews, was a guy who knew what he wanted and got it. Even down to things like, I even heard this recently, where when Walt built Disney World, apparently there was an unforeseen amount of money he specifically spent on making the park look brand new every single day. He invested a fortune into always keeping the park pristine so that no kid would ever have a ride breakdown on, no paint would chip, nothing. Because he believed so much, and the park itself is the experience. The park itself is the vision. It's pretty much, it's his project. It's his movie, essentially, he's created. And he puts that in a lot of his projects, where you can see that, like, you watch a Disney film, and you can be like, this is what he was going for, and this is what he did to pull it off. And we're about to get into the ones that a lot of people recognize. As a warm-up for this one, we actually took a look at the first ever color project that Walt worked on, because a lot of people don't know this. Walt was the first guy to get full color, which was a project called Flowers and Trees. The plot, there are flowers and there are trees.
That's it. It's just them, trees are alive, they fight for their row. Dude tree tries to woo lady tree. Hijinks happen. Literally, yeah.
And by no means are we saying that this is a cartoon that is, it's absolutely horrible now or doesn't hold up, but it is very simple. And I think compared to something like Steamboat Willie, it doesn't necessarily have the same amount of like lasting nostalgic gravitas as a piece. I mean, it's a quaint little piece. I mean, it's happy. It's like there's good trees and flowers, and there's a bad tree that wants to get in the way, and he starts a fire, and they all try to put the fire out, and they all work together, they put the fire out, and everyone's happy again. And that's really all that happens. The only thing that was really of a great merit to it back then, I mean, it was whimsical, it was good, but color was a huge deal back then. This came out in 1932, which, if it puts it in perspective for you guys, even late 1920s, we were still dealing with completely, black and white, no sound. This was, like, in this couple of years, right around the early 1930s, everything started changing in film. Everything was getting big. And before that, we had really simple, ugly-looking, just red-green color. And it actually was only used in, like, big musicals and stuff like that, and people actually hated it. And people said, I would rather see, like, a good black and white movie than watch a crappy color movie. And for them to go from that all the way to what Green Greens looks like. And there's no in-between. It's just really crappy color that looks like just as good, pretty much just as good as you would see in a nostalgic Disney project, maybe even like 20, 30 years later. And it was so good that people actually would pay big money to go see the feature film and then watch this right before it came on, because they would play this before the feature, and then they would leave.
Which I really don't see that now, but I guess that must have been a huge deal. Because, I mean, yeah, it is a big deal. But now, as we said, there's nothing really spectacular about the cartoon except for the color, which it shows how big of an impact it is. It's just, holy crap, they're the first persons to color, and it doesn't look like ass. Just beautiful color. Just that small thing blew everyone else out of the water.
If nothing else, I would say definitely is a cartoon that's sort of a testament to that thing I mentioned with Walt. Well, like, if Walt wants something, he gets something. And the reason that he innovated so many different things. And like, throughout Disney's history, you're going to notice how many things that Walt is the first one to because he wanted it. And that was a big one. Well, let's move on to some of the ones that you guys are actually going to recognize. In 1937, we have Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Which is a really fantastical movie in the technical part. I mean, it's not, like, all the stuff in the technical, like, they actually drawn and laid the things over and over, like, all that stuff's really interesting and really cool and really innovative. But the movie at the end of the day is a nice Disney movie. It's great. I don't know. There's not too much to talk about it. It's like, it's the first one. It did good. It did a bunch of achievements. But it's like, oh, hey, there were dwarves and they were thing. And a lot of it's actually kind of forgettable, which is sad. There are really good moments. The dwarves and their hi-ho and their first thing. Her running through the forest and the trees all just freaking out, even though they're just trees, and she's weird, trippy effect. The mirror on the wall.
Oh my god, the mirror.
That's a fruit.
That scared the crap out of me as a kid. I don't know why the mirrors freaked me out, but like forever, in general, that movie actually scared me quite a bit as a kid.
There's a lot of dark parts in the movie. Like, when she first becomes the hag thing, and she starts laughing, and she walks through the cave, and there's that actual skeleton chained up on the wall, and she kicks the bucket.
Poison oozing out of the face of the apple, and the...
yeah, it's a skull. Like, the dude literally, she's like, give me her heart. Here's the goodbye. The huntsman.
Like, the huntsman pins her down to a rock with a knife, and he's like, he's just about to do it. Like,
but he couldn't do it because she was so beautiful, and he's like, oh, no. Oh, yeah, but that's just part of the material. It was the 30s, you can't.
Oh, standards and practices, how we love you.
Yeah. They eventually got better. Eventually.
Snow White has always been a perplexing one for me, because I feel there's a lot of things this film does right, but there's also a lot of things in this film that just do not hold up. Like you mentioned, it's really cool this was the first film that ever did multi-layered animation. And once again, Walt was one of those people, he never liked to look experimental. If he was dedicated, he was going to do something, he wasn't going to take 5 tries at it and eventually get it right. He was going to never let the thing see the light of day until he nailed it. And the look of this style of animation was just so beautiful, and it makes the thematic elements of this film awesome. In Walt's early days, he had this style where he worked less with characters and more with just overall themes and emotions. Characters in his films almost existed just as a means to make an audience feel a way. Snow White has people complain Snow White has little to no personality on her own, but the thing that works about her character, I feel, although it does not save her character in the whole, is the fact that she is a really good catalyst in the way you follow her in her emotions. You can get scared when she gets scared, and you can get happy when she gets happy. And the characters in this film, their emotions are portrayed so well with the music and all that, and the film is, in literal terms, an emotional roller coaster. That being said, judged on completely brass tacks merits, the fact that the story itself of this film is blatantly sacrificed in the means of making this emotional coaster work is unfortunately something you can't quite look over. It doesn't ruin the film for me, but I can't pretend like I don't see it.
Yeah, the characters really suffer. Like, all the dwarves are literally one-note characters. Like, even their names
are the one-word characters.
Like, oh, it's easy. He sneezes a lot. Ha, ha, ha. Where's Dopey? You look at him, he ate a thing of soap.
Grumpy's grumpy, that's the joke! Like,
maybe Grumpy has a smaller arc. Like, small little, oh, look, he's not as grumpy. Oh, look, he actually does care, and he gets that thing. I mean, there's a small thing, but yeah, at the end of the day, it was more darn classic. Like, you watch it once, and then you don't really. It's hard to watch again. It really is.
By all means, if you are a person who has actually never seen Snow White before, I do recommend you watch it.
You gotta watch, yeah.
But I'm not gonna say that it's something you need to marathon every year. You see Snow White once, you've seen Snow White a million times. That's just kind of how it feels for me.
Yeah, it's really hard to watch again. The music isn't good at all.
No.
No, like, especially Snow White's voice, it grates.
Yes. I wish it didn't. Well, her normal voice is okay. Her singing voice is nails on a chalkboard.
Yeah, like, I'm wishing. It's a stupid, boring song. Their only song, Hi Ho, is just, you love Hi Ho. I love that.
Yeah,
That's just because it's catchy and it gets in your head.
It's one of Disney's first earworms, and it certainly is not one of the last.
Okay, whistling while you work will get stuck in my head, but not like I like this. Not like I like this. I'm like, damn it, why did that appear in my head? I don't even like that song.
One thing I really do like about Snow White, though, is that Snow White is often one of the most parodied of Disney films, and there have been a lot of really good Snow White parodies over the years from a lot of different people. My personal favorite was when they did the Simpsons version, and they did Ho Hi, because the joke was that the lawyer character was going to sue them if they told the story of Snow White. So they start singing ho hi, it's off to work, ho hi. This song's not like any song you know, ho hi, ho hi, ho hi, ho hi. And there's like tons of other versions. So I feel like the legacy of Snow White is much stronger than this film of Snow White itself. But if you haven't seen it, watch it a first time.
Have you not seen it? Now, all the things you've said about that one, especially like the character was nothing, Pinocchio, that is like the complete opposite. Like, that has character that has so much character. It's just a little, even the small little characters that do nothing, like Gideon and Honest Jack, right? Just the two little guys who convince him.
We're just wandering con artists who just, it's like...
They're not a big part of the movie, but they have so much character. And you get Jiminy Cricket, and you got Geppetto, who actually cares him so much. And even the stupid little fish has character into it. All the characters are really done good. That's like, he looked at it like, here's Snow White. Here's what we did. Oh, here's what we need to do. Boom, they did it, and they did it in spades.
One thing I will say that's interesting about Pinocchio, though, is Pinocchio is one I will recommend you watch as an adult, because you'll watch as an adult and you'll realize how many things you forgot are in this movie. And I'm not just talking about just the darker content stuff. I mean, there's entire sequences of things that happen in this movie that will just lose your memory, because this is a complicated movie. I mean, as far as, like, the number of things that happen, the number of characters that are in it, for, like, such a simple story about, I want to be a real boy, there's quite an adventure that goes on in this film.
And, yeah, Pinocchio, he actually does, and he learns his lesson. There's so many brilliant things I can't even start, because I could literally do a podcast probably just talking about Pinocchio.
As could I.
It's just like, I love that movie so much. That is Pinocchio. That is Disney at its early Disney, purely at its best, I believe.
Absolutely. That was the point. I feel like this is the film where Disney started to work at a point when things started to last. I mean, to this day, When You Wish Upon a Star, it's just there. And there's so many cool things with this film. Like, the number of themes they explore in this film, everything from, themes of adolescence, themes of religion, themes of, morality, humanity.
Growing up. What's it mean to be human? Even that, basically. I mean, that's basic. Don't go really into it. But, I mean, it's the overall point. There's just so many really mature topics that go into it that kids can easily understand and digest and get it.
And then there's other things you watch as an adult and you're like, wait a minute, the Donkey's kids never come back. They're gone forever.
That's horrifying. I am gonna have nightmares just thinking about that kid. I mean, the kid was a dick, but he was a kid though. Turned into a donkey and gets sold into slavery and whipped and beaten.
It seems weird though at some point. Like, and I'm not saying it's for kids. I mean, and this is like Disney's second outing is like trying to be like the big like the big man in animation, because Snow White made so much money. I mean, in its day, it was like number 2 when it came out, next to Birth of a Nation, which was like several million. Like, this is for inflation today, I think Birth of a Nation was like 350 million. And this was like, still like 285 million or something crazy this film made.
Yeah.
So the idea that, like, so people were, like, this is only 3 years later, and people are like, hey, the new Disney film's coming out, and they're like, heck yeah, let's do this. And you have kids drinking and smoking, and, the giant, horrific whale that just swallows
that whale.
The whale.
That, just in that piece of just the whale swallowing it up, could be, like, that is, like, the absolute purest animation.
Yes.
Just like, that's animation at its best.
Like
just
that.
The huge emotion, just this raft gets speed, and oh god, that's so amazing.
Because, like, as we've discussed, like, Disney has a knack for being able to use music and animation to just convert, like, true emotion. And, like, he did all of that just to create the whale. Like, the sounds of the whale, the looks of the whale, the way that the water moves, like, everything. Like, this whale is not a character. This whale is a force in this movie. And just I would say, if nothing else, like, the creation of this whale is a reason for this film to exist in and of itself. The other weird stuff that's fun to, like, this is just a fun film to, like, find all the little things. I haven't seen it long enough where I can't, like, think of them all right here. But I do remember enough of it to know that it's definitely one that's worth trying to find the things in.
Oh, yeah. You always find something new watching a movie. Truthfully, I think so.
Now, speaking of music converting to emotion, Fantasia.
Fantasia. I'm not as big as a fan of a lot of people. I like it. I love what they were trying to do. It didn't hit me as much as it's a bunch of swords and cool, and it's really cool at points. At the end of the day, it's like, I don't like it as much as the story doesn't work, but as its technical sound, engineering, and all the stuff behind that, like, the dude invented sound stuff, and you more about that, but he invented new way of sound just to do this huge epic movie. And this is the thing, I know he said a million times, this is one of the first things he wanted to do when he even started in Disney, just a movie. I like it, but it's not nearly my favorite personally.
I can see that. I do admit I like Fantasia, but I'm in the same group as a lot of other people are with Fantasia. That when you really look back and you think Fantasia, it's always Sorcerer's Apprentice and then the rest of Fantasia. And that's just the way most people think of it. I can remember bits and pieces of different Fantasia pieces. Really, the only 3 I can physically remember off the top of my head are the butterflies from the very beginning, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and the final cartoon with the giant blue devil and the...
Chernobog.
Yes.
That's the only ones I only remember the Sorcerer's Apprentice, which isn't as great. It's interesting and cool, but it's all right.
Beautiful, but it's...
And it doesn't get really cool. And the ending is really cool, when he's finally at the top and he's... But it's a nice little whimsical adventure. And I don't remember what the last one's called, but the devil one where it's
Night on Bald Mountain.
Yes, thank you. And just that one, it's good and it's fun, it's interesting, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's a collection of shorts. Really good shorts.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's a collection of shorts. And it's like, that's cool.
I think part of it that goes with that too is that, like, part of Fantasia is, like, really experiencing it in its true form. Like, if you go to sitting down on your computer in front of a TV and, like, pop in the DVD of Fantasia, you're never really gonna get the full effect. And then, like, seeing it, like, when theaters, like, re-release it and you get to see it, like, with the giant sound system and the big screen and, like, when they released Fantasia 2000, like, they built IMAX theaters that were even bigger, that they were just referred to as Fantasia theaters, because they wanted to show these films off. And unfortunately, watching Fantasia today, it's cool, but unless you have the ability to watch it in that environment, it's always just going to feel like you're watching a really good theater performance from the nosebleed seats. It's just going to have a little bit of that effect to it.
Yeah. If they did release, like, a totally live version of the Horror Jokers, I would totally go and see it. Like, not even remotely think about it, like, take my money and go see it. But, as a, it's a small little DVD. It's kind of...
Do you have enough to say about Reluctant Dragon? I'm not sure if I do.
That was a thing that existed, and I can't truly think about it. It's not even coming to me.
If you're a big fan of the Reluctant Dragon, I apologize. I really don't know much about it other than, hey, it's another one of those,
Reluctant Dragon?
It's that one about the guy that, like, I think it had a bit of, like, an animation live-action hybrid. I don't think...
The big green dragon thing.
Yeah!
Oh!
It's just a weird, whimsical little piece, but there's really not that much else to it that I remember.
I don't know. I couldn't remember it. Maybe if I watch it,
it was a thing. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Dumbo! Dumbo, we've got stuff to talk about. At least a little bit.
Dumbo, there's not a huge much. It's like... nothing really huge. Nothing really huge happened as far as Disney goes. It's a good movie. It's a nice movie. It's an emotional movie. Like, a lot of people get how really emotional it gets. Well, then it gets really silly and kind of stupid, and it's like, but it never has a huge feel. It's like, oh, here's this really emotional, and here it's really silly and stupid, and at the end of the day, it doesn't do enough of one thing that it deserves to be really talked about. It's a good movie overall. It's not a great movie. It really isn't. I'm sorry.
Good. I don't think it's as memorable. I do think that although it's unbalanced, it was one of the first times that Walt, I think, really tried to, like, really get at the feels. Like, he was trying to, like, really get people attached. Like, when he gets sad, it gets really sad. And it wasn't... He didn't get into some more of the darker themes until the next film we're going to talk about does a little bit more of that, but, like, Dumbo is an overall forgettable movie that happens to have a couple of really memorable sequences. One of which haunted my childhood for several years, the pink elephants.
I love the pink elephants.
I can't stand the pink elephants. The pink elephants honestly gave me nightmares as a kid.
I love them. It was cool.
Back when Disney characters could get drunk off their... Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, it has a lot of good... Like, the ending scene... Like, it's more memorable than is actually really cool if you go back and watch it. It's like, he can fly, look at him. Oh, okay. It just needed to be more what it... Like, if it really... Like, when it does feelies, it does good. But it doesn't do enough feelies. When it wants to be silly, it can. Like, Pink Elephants. It's very memorable, and it's silly and cool. But it doesn't do enough of that. It's a wishy-washy.
It's like, a film that can't make up its mind.
Yeah. If it made up its mind, it probably could have been a really good, either really silly, fun movie, or a really deep, serious, like, holy crap. Like, when you see him actually wrap up, like, the mother and the thing is, I know a lot of people, like, my mother says she cries at that part, and she can cry at that part a lot. I never especially cried, but I get all the feelings of it.
You get why people get more feely than you do.
Yeah, and I get it. I'm like, that's actually a really deep, really cool moment. And, like, when the dude, like, when he's been, after he's brought in all the makeup, he's just been messed with, he's been toying with people the clowns are using for his amusements, you feel awful for him. God, he's just a little baby elephant. It's just, they got clown makeup. And
humans are horrible in that movie.
Yeah, makes me sad to be a human. But there's not enough of that. There need to be more or less of that.
The only other thing I'll talk about briefly with that film, because I know that whenever I bring up Dumbo, it's a thing that everyone brings up, and is another one of those weird cultural little things. I think people give a little bit too much crap to the crows. I want to be very clear about this. Disney was not the guy who decided to create the device where, in a lot of animalistic films, that crows were often used as an immediate portrayal of African American people. He did not come up with that trope, and he was very far from the most belligerent or the most offensive version of using that trope. He used it just to communicate it because it was a shorthand people understood. There is no racist commentary attached to the idea of the characters being that way, and if you talk to anyone who lived back in these days, all of the outrageous rumors that people have had over the years of Walt Disney being racist in any way, in any meaningful way, have been disbanded. And for whatever reason, I feel like between this and a film we will briefly talk about in a little bit, it's just one of those things that I think people just like to call it a thing, but they don't really know what they're talking about. They just kind of want to start a flame war over. Yeah. And it's just, the intention was in no way racist, and I think it's one of those things people need to let go.
Yeah, I never saw it in this movie. Some other movies I can see, and they can make it an argument. This, I really didn't see it in The Crows. And, yeah, they weren't bad as nearly.
And there were good, entertaining characters, too, which, hey, if they were supposed to represent African-American people in this movie, that's actually a better overall portrayal than they would have had in other films in that point. If it was his intention.
Yeah, that was 41. Yeah.
42, moving on, is Bambi. Oh, this is a tough one.
Bambi's really kiddie, and it's hard to watch nowadays. I like it. I loved it as a kid. I loved it more than I wanted to admit as a kid, because it seemed girly and stupid and young, and I was just a young boy. But it was a really cool movie. But, I mean, and it's a fun, whimsy adventure, which a bunch of, serious moments. In the end, there are a bunch of really cool scenes, like the waterfall scene where they both jump off, he's clashing with the other deer, and it's cool. And the scene where, Bambi's mother, it's that triggers your heart. But yeah, there's a little yay, Thumper's doing things and
there is something to be said for this is the first time that Disney tried to make a film, it was far enough along where films could actually have genres and film as a medium was developed enough that you could target specific audiences. So this is the first time that I feel like Disney was truly going after little kids. And from that perspective, trying to critique Bambi as an adult is kind of like trying to dissect Dora the Explorer. It's not that it's a bad show, it's just you're in a part of your life where just watching it for the sake of watching it is a little bit more difficult. Because there is a difference between family movies and kid movies, and Bambi is debatably Disney's first kid movie. It's a really good kid movie, but watching it by yourself as an adult, a little tricky. If you have kids, by all means, show it to them, have a great time, but fair warning, by yourself, you're gonna feel like you outgrew a good portion of it.
Yeah, it really shows the difference between a family movie and a kid movie. And that's really too much to say about it. It's a really good kids movie. It's not a family movie where a lot of the other ones are. And I feel it really they dropped the ball a little bit there. I feel like making a kids movie, not a family movie. And that's why it's not talked about nearly as much as it should be.
Speaking about not talked about, our next couple projects we'll be jumping around a little bit because there's some stuff we're not going to recognize as much. Saludos Amigos, I'm not sure if you're aware of this one. I've seen bits and pieces of it. It was a thing. They took different people from different countries and let them animate a thing, and they put it all together. Culturally, it's kind of cool.
It's a cool project.
Outside of that, it's a cool concept, and there's some decent cartoons out of it, and the Three Caballeros came out of that. Memorable characters, not memorable movie. That's kind of how it was for me.
I can remember one scene from the movie where the red parrot, I think, is singing really long. And he's holding that note, and they're trying to sing, and they're doing it. That's literally all I remember of the movie. That's it. It's a movie, and through this whole kind of time, they were trying a bunch of different things, but nothing really worked. And like, there's a couple of years right in this time frame where it's like they didn't have a big, huge thing. It's just kind of they like didn't. They were trying a couple things, and nothing got huge until later. It's
well,
like,
in general, this string of years was kind of cool for Walt because there was no real status quo. There was no like this is the mainstream of how you do things. And so he just did like some just weird musical animated experiments for a couple of years.
Yeah,
and that's what a lot of these films are really. They're like, hey, let's take this piece of music and let's try this new kind of animated thing and we'll slap it together, we'll put it in theaters and people will love it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Especially because, I mean, it helped him hone his, it's him honing his craft in these years. And, there's a big chunk of them. If you have a little bit, you want to take a look at a couple, by all means. But for the time being, we'll probably get back to more of the narrative ones. The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, 1949.
I haven't seen it, unfortunately. I've seen one small part of it, and it terrified me, the pumpkin seed. But I really haven't seen it, to my shame, and I feel awful.
I have seen them both. It's been years. Let me see. Wind in the Willows, the Mr. Toad part it's got some good animation, some good action, and some memorable characters. Mr. Toad is crazy. But he's a funny kind of crazy. It's just long story short, it's just a guy who loves his car, and he gives up his entire kingdom for a car. And then the evil people refuse to give him his house back. And the only real memorable thing about the movie is this really funny slapstick sequence of them, we gotta sneak into the castle and the guard is sleeping and we have to, grab the deed out of his pocket without waking him up. Like, a lot of it was that. Adventures of Ichabod, most people pretty much only remember this as, obviously this was Disney's first crack at the Sleepy Hollow story, and a lot of people don't pay as much attention to Ichabod himself and more attention to the flaming Headless Horseman, which, my goodness, does that leave an impression on a young child. Yeah. But outside of just like the pure scary factor, it was kind of this thing that Walt was able to do with the whale. Like, the character is a force. The way he sounds, the way the music swells, the way the animation looks, it's all very well constructed to make you feel a very specific way. And this is also one of the most unlikable protagonists that Disney had put in a story so far. Like, it's supposed to be a cautionary tale, and Ichabod is really big jerk in this story, and the Headless Horseman is supposed to be his comeuppance. Like, this is a story about a guy who's just waiting around for his fiance's father to die so he can take all his money and have his wife, serve him hand and foot. Like, this is our hero, ladies and gentlemen. Like,
Wow. Really?
Yeah!
Okay.
But no one remembers that because their memory gets wiped out of... they see the Headless Horseman and they're like, I want to go home. Yeah. Cinderella, 1950.
Cinderella. The first big, they started the first big thing. Like,
debatably, this was... Well, actually, yeah, this would be considered, under technical definition, especially for the influence, really the first Disney princess movie. And I'm not saying that to say that Snow White doesn't count or anything like that, but as far as the aesthetic of what those movies put in and the way that they focused on their characters, Cinderella really is the first one that did that.
And it does it good. It's a fine movie. There's a bunch of cool parts. There's a bunch of parts. It's not huge. Like, Okay, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It's a fun movie. It's a good movie, and like Jocks is the mouse. He's a cool character, and Cinderella and the birds, and they build the grass. And it's a good movie. It's a fun movie. It's a lot more girly, which is really fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just it never hit me because I was a young boy.
I think
it's a good movie still, though.
I think the way I would describe it is, I've talked earlier, like, this was the era when Disney wanted to do, like, conveying things through, like, changing emotion and theme and all that. And some people don't like that. If you do like that, this is probably one of the best versions of that he did. Mainly because he finally figured out how to get all of that without sacrificing characters. Because Cinderella does have memorable characters, both on the the heroes and the villains and the side characters and between the fairy godmother and the mice and the dog and the cat and you don't really forget any of the characters in this movie. And this is the first time, I think, it's really far enough along. Like, you can remember pretty much every character who had something to do with this movie. Maybe not by name, but you remember them. Like, I don't remember the butler's name, but I don't remember
most of them. But yeah, not everyone, but they do a good job, and it's
I think that I think this is the first time, like, his animation, like, physically on paper, like, it's really polished in this movie for, like, the first time. Like, before this, I think there's a lot more done in oils, and everything was a little bit, there wasn't much line work in his previous projects. They were a little bit, I want to say foggy, but, like, if you see, like, old oil paintings and stuff like that, like, the actual blacks that separate things were a lot softer, that was what I was looking for. Like, if you go back and watch Snow White, it is an incredibly soft animated movie.
There's, like, really basically no lines. Yeah. But...
like, her face almost fades into nothing, really. Unless you watch an enhanced version. If you watch it like an old VHS copy, or better yet, an even previous version of that, there's moments where it almost feels like she has no face. Because things fade away. But Cinderella, I feel like the techniques of line work and animation were finally getting a lot more polished. And that helped... I think that helped Walt present emotions more subtly in this film. Especially, I feel like, the evil godmother. I mean, not the evil godmother. The evil stepmother.
Lady Tremaine.
Lady Tremaine. See, I told you he knows his Disney movies, because I'm betting none of you out there know her name was Lady Tremaine.
I don't. People out there know way more and could name a lot of characters.
I think, in my opinion, she was one of the first, like, really good villains Disney pulled off. As far as, like, she didn't have any powers, she didn't have, she's not maleficent. It's like, I always describe the character as, like, if you had a Disney villain that could have the command the Maleficent had without the technical power to back it up, it would probably be Lady Tremaine. She's just scary. And there's, like, realistically, she has almost no power. But the way that she acts, it's like, even people that don't work for her, like the guy that brings out the foot. I mean, that brings out the foot.
Yeah. That's a whole nother creepy.
Gory movie.
Whole nother creepy.
Even the guy that brings out the shoe, I mean, he basically takes orders from her, and he doesn't need to. Like, there's no reason for him to.
Works for the prince. God damn, he's actually.
It's mostly in her facial animations. Were just
her animation.
Like when she scowls, like it just buries a hole in your soul.
Eyes. Those eyes.
Oh my gosh, those eyes.
Those yellow.
And it shows in, like, how every character in this movie is scared of her. Like, the mice are scared of her, the dog's scared of her, the cat's scared of her. Even the stepsisters are scared of her at one point or another. It's been a while since I've seen it. I felt like this is the beginning of the era when, like, Disney feels, like, just modern enough that you can go back and watch stuff without a bunch of caveats. It's pretty early on that, but I feel like if you were, like, a big Disney aficionado, then Cinderella's a little bit especially easier to watch than something like Snow White or Dumbo or Bambi.
I actually disagree. I have a harder time watching. I don't know why. I have a little harder time watching Cinderella than I do most of the other ones, except Snow White, because that's.
It might be because Cinderella's really girly, and I don't mean that like a sexist way, but it is a very, very, very girly movie.
That might have to do with. Yeah, that might. I can watch some girly things, but I don't know what it. I can't. Thing is, I can't specifically tell you why. But there's just something that keeps me away from it, and I don't know. Maybe that's just me, though. I'm not saying it's a bad movie by
Cinderella is very much a it's your call. It's once again it's in that Cinderella. It's in that Snow White category. If you're a crazy person who's been living under a tree and you haven't seen it yet, by all means go see it.
Oh yeah.
But as far as rewatching it, it's up to you. You might find something out of it. You might get a little bit overwhelmed. It's still a little old, but it's up to you. The live-action Treasure Island from 1950. I remember very little of it. I do want to do it briefly because eventually in this list we're gonna compare it to Treasure Planet, which is Disney's next take at this. And I think it was kind of cool that I saw. It was weird I saw Treasure Planet first before I watched Treasure Island. Treasure Island it feels really Disney, which is hard when you're trying to make a story about a little kid being thrust into the world of evil, marauding pirates. Not to say that you can't make good G-rated pirates, because Disney's definitely made some, but like Treasure Island, it's really, I don't want to use the word hokey because hokey's a little mean. It does feel old. If you are one of those people like me, like I can watch really old stuff and not be bothered by it. But if I was to recommend this movie to somebody, if you like the story of Treasure Island, I would recommend this about as much as I'd recommend pretty much any other version. But just be prepared. This movie did come out in 1950. Like, it's an old movie. And live action old holds up, at least feels a little bit more daunting than animation old.
Oh, yeah.
Animation holds up a little bit better in time, but basically most people have trouble watching anything before 1960 without some degree of like, okay, here we go. That's usually about most people's cutoff point.
Yeah, I would say so. Like, I never cared much about the live action stuff nearly as much. I love the animation. I mean, I don't know. I've never actually seen or if I have, I don't remember anything of it, of the live action. I don't know.
The story of Treasure Island is so simple.
Yeah,
and most versions of Treasure Island, with very small exceptions, almost follow the story like line per line. Like it's nice structure. Like it's a nicely structured story, and I like that. It was like a big twist back in the day that you had a villain that could become a hero, and it's like one of the main things that was nice about it, but that sequence was kind of rushed in the movie, and that didn't help too much. Yeah. Now, Travis, I know you don't really have much to say about Alice in Wonderland.
Love Alice in Wonderland.
What?
This is probably my favorite Disney movie of the old classics.
Like pre-1960-ish.
Yeah. Like of the
classic
old
Disney.
Which is weird because, like, I love this movie, but no offense, it's not. Nothing really. I admit nothing really spectacular happens. It's just a fun movie, and I think it really just it's like it gets serious and gets dark, but it's pretty. At the end of the day, it's just let's take Alice in Wonderland and take a couple things from it, and through looking at it, take a couple things there. It doesn't. It's not really follows Alice in Wonderland the most correctly, but it feels. It has the most. It feels along with the classic book more than a lot of the other ones do. It understands a little bit more, and it's just a fun adventure movie. There's a lot of really good animation. They experimented the hell out of this with the animation. Even just the Cheshire Cat, where it just winds in. It does a bunch of cool things. But at the end of the day, it's not the huge... I love the movie, but I mean, it's not like the hugest, deepest thing ever, not remotely. It's just a fun movie.
I'm on the same boat on a lot of things. I really do love Alice in Wonderland as a piece. Animation wise, spot on. As far as like physically, like how physically good brass tacks the animation looks on screen, it is the cleanest, most color popping. I mean, it's a tour de force of physical animation talent in this movie that cannot be taken away from it. Its story or lack thereof does work. Like, even in most versions of the story, I like the fact of how they present the idea of the stories in this movie, where it feels like vignettes of Wonderland that Alice happens to be a character in each of them. And although it doesn't match up with the overall point of the film, like, personally, I like the idea that Alice in Wonderland can be open to so many different interpretations. It is just a world of a character who goes into a world with a bunch of different characters, and they don't go out of their way to try to explain or push you towards what each of these characters is supposed to mean or what they represent. They're almost like really intricate canvases that let you just project whatever you want. And ideally, that's supposed to be what makes multiple interpretations such a good idea. But often, people just like to keep the madness of Wonderland, but they never explain why it's madness. They never give meaning to its madness. When you look at the character of Alice in this film, her journey is quite interesting. Although they don't give her much time in the real world to establish this, when you listen to how she talks, how she interacts with people, in my opinion, the main idea of this particular version of Alice in Wonderland is when Alice enters Wonderland, she's a very brass tacks, this is the way things are, logical, straight-minded person. Because in this area, like, I feel like, yeah, she's a woman, she's, like, taught, like, this is the way you need to be, and, like, you are logical, you are smart, you are, like, you learn things by the books, and all these things. And the more she tries to be that, the worse things go for her. And the more she embraces, well, of course it's this force eating the thing that makes you change size and drinking the thing and like all this stuff. Of course that's the way things work. Like, for me, it's her embracing this idea that sometimes there is no logical answer. Sometimes you just can't know everything. Like, the world is not something you can just predict and put in books. It is the breathing, crazy, mad thing. And when she embraces that madness, her character becomes more interesting. The story becomes more interesting the more she falls, in metaphorical terms, farther into the rabbit hole.
Which is funny, because that's like the literally opposite of what the author was trying to say in the book. But that's neither here nor there. That's just a funny thing. But this movie on its own entity is really fun, really interesting. It's quirky. You can put as much or as little thought into it, and you can, if you want to get into it and deep analyze it, you can. But if you just want to sit down, more like I prefer, and just watch the movie, it's just a fun adventure movie. And take it how you can do whatever you want with the movie. It's one of the most rewatchable, I truly think, of classic Disney, old style Disney.
One other thing I will mention about the film really quick, only because I just recently published my first novel in my Man Who Watched Batman series, and one of the episodes I covered was one called Mad as a Hatter. As many people know, actually several characters from Alice in Wonderland have been reinterpreted as Batman villains in different various canons. I cannot speak to every single version of Batman who's trying to make Alice in Wonderland canon, or its characters canon in some way or another. What I can speak to is specifically the interpretation of the Mad Hatter and how Alice in Wonderland is used in this particular game. I find to be, not this particular game, in this particular story is really interesting. Mainly because they are not trying to copy Alice in Wonderland. They are not trying to just be, just paint by numbers another version of Alice in Wonderland. They are actually trying to use these characters, and they do have something to say with these characters, and they do know what they're supposed to represent. And that's what makes the episode really work. Works enough where the Mad Hatter actually becomes a continuing character in the overall Batman animated series. But that first episode in particular, if nothing else, if you are a person who's just interested in the story of Alice in Wonderland and how it's interpreted in different ways, I definitely recommend you track that episode down.
Okay.
Peter Pan.
Tangent. Gone. Peter Pan.
All right, Peter Pan. Whimsy?
It's whimsy. Okay.
Well, it's got more than whimsy, but it definitely has some whimsy.
Okay. You got Peter Pan, I have to say this, you can't think about it too much. When you start thinking about it, like, it gets weird and creepy, and there's like, don't think about it too much. It's just a Peter Pan story. Just think about the story. It's a fun story. It's an adventure. It's the most advent. Okay, I'm not sure, but it's a fun adventure. Peter Pan, he grabs the kids and has tons of memorable moments, tons of classic moments. Captain Hook is just fun. He's the best villain up to this point. He's just
by all means, yes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah,
he's the best male villain up to this point, for sure.
Sure, yeah, okay.
They had a lot of female villains in early Disney, didn't they?
Oh, yeah, wow.
The more you know.
Oh, weird thing. Anyway.
All right.
He's just a fun villain. He's actually the most villain up to this point with, like, a depth to him. Like, he's scared of the crocodile and scared of the thing. It's like, holy crap, that's not villains are just evil villains. He actually has character. That's not just evil. Yeah, he is just evil. That too. That's also part of his character. But he also has moments, and like, it's like, it's hard to.
Let me take a crack at it. Billion times we've mentioned Walt really wanted to capture the feeling of being a kid in everything he created. But Peter Pan was the first time where that's literally the story of the movie. Is the prospect of being able to be a kid forever. And the fact that, like, Disney went the direction of what he eventually says by the end of the movie about that, compared to what he's building, it makes people scratch their heads a little bit. It's like Travis just said, sometimes it's very easy to overthink Peter Pan. As it was a whimsical romp adventure, it's like a swashbuckling fun bonanza. It's awesome. Once again, animation's great, memorable characters. Captain Hook is great. He is a very memorable villain. He keeps himself separated in style from other people. He's a very sophisticated... The thing that I think works for him is that he's a sophisticated man, and the way that people... that he is defeated constantly, I mean, it's the device with the crocodile and with Peter Pan and all that, but it is when you break, for lack of a better term, when you take his fancy away from him, is when he becomes weak. Like, his power comes from his pompous control and the switching of the hooks, and is like, yes, I shall get that, Peter Pan. Like, when he gets to be, like, when he gets to make the monologues and do the thing, like, he is, in definition, he is a bark more than bite villain. Which there have been a couple of in Disney previous, but this is like the first one where it's like, it is 100% true. Like, on his own brass tacks. I mean, he's not even that good of a swordsman when they put it down together. But it's when you take away his control that, it's a cool thing as a kid to see. They make him look so awesome, but then they take that away from him just as quickly. And that's a really cool thing about this film. The whimsy's great. The characters are all great. The shadow scene is awesome in the beginning. There's a lot of memorable scenes.
There's so many.
The shadow scenes, the invention of Tinkerbell, which is...
The first flying second star to the right. That's actually a really good moment. They just pick up and fly and they get in Neverland with all the things. tons of good moments.
And I love the aesthetic of, like, physically what Wonderland is. Like...
Wonderland. Neverland.
Yeah,
I know.
Curse you, Disney, and all of your lands.
Landland's the most...
Neverland, and this brings up one interesting point that I will address about this movie that a lot of people criticize, is the Native American scene in the movie, which... what Disney is trying to create fits with what Wonderland is. Is basically, it is a bunch of kids playing pretend, making up the world. Like, in general, the Native American scene, it is just supposed to represent it is not meant to be a representation of true Native Americans. It is supposed to represent a kid-like aesthetic of the cowboys and Indians, like... feeling as a child. It is not meant to be a racial cultural statement.
But it still is, and this is one of the few that actually has legitimate things, and it feels a little disfaced. I know it wasn't merely meant to be.
It feels more ignorant than it feels attacking.
Yeah,
but unfortunately, ignorance is not bliss.
Yeah.
Walt can do wrong. I mean, Walt has made mistakes. Is nothing to say that it's just one of those things. It doesn't... the cultural sensitivity, take it with a grain of salt, know it's there, know the intention more than just the end product, and the scene will bother you much less.
Yes.
But know that was at least Walt's intention with the scene. It's very important to know that.
Yes, but it's still...
It's a little difficult to swallow at times.
Even though I love that song. I do really love that song, What Makes the Red Man Red. I know it is like, but I still love that song and I can't help it.
I just love the music that plays with the crocodile.
Oh, yeah! Okay, yeah, it just took a...
Like that, and then his Hook's facial twitches.
When he
just, oh my goodness.
You just hear him grieve out, and you don't see him at all, you just hear that thinking little clock mix into it, and he just... Oh,
and the thing I like about it, too, is that, like, Hook was, especially, they've done other versions of it, too, where, like, Hook has always been, like, the making of a good villain. Even in the sequel no one talks about, like, the direct-to-video sequel with, Wendy's daughter, like, even in that one, Hook is still good, where it goes... Will you show me? Well, if I show you how to get to Wonderland, you won't hurt Peter, right? Oh, I wouldn't dare hurt it. You have my word. I will not hurt a single hair on his head. It's like, but you told me you wouldn't hurt him. I told you I would not hurt a single hair on his head. And this is the hair I will not hurt.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just... Yeah, but... And for, like, such a cheesy direct-to-video movie... You still get a great villain out of it. Like, it's
one of the least awful.
The fact that he was always kind of silly made it so that when the movie got silly, he still felt legitimate. Because silly can be scary too, and that's one thing that Hook gets in spades. Is that he can be silly and scary at the same time.
Another thing we need to talk.
Up next?
Another thing we need to talk about is actually Peter Pan.
Yes.
Because Peter Pan, watching again, he's a lot more of a dick than people like. He's
a really immature troublemaker.
He's a little kid, but it's more than just kids will be kids or a dick. He's just a he gets better thing, but I really like that they do arguably the main character hit between Min and Wendy. He's the name of the thing. It's about Peter Pan.
He's the impact character who leads the adventure, but Wendy is the one that goes. The
theme's more about Wendy, but anyway.
Yes.
The story anyway, but Peter Pan is actually I really like because he's not just the hero for guy. He's a really good villain with huge flaws, and there hasn't been a big one. I guess Pinocchio being ignorant and stupid was that, but he has a huge flaw, and that's actually a really good thing that people don't bring up. But it's not like a huge flaw to actually break his character, and that's a really good thing.
Absolutely.
And I just need to mention it before we move on.
Absolutely, by all means. There's some stuff here we're
Lady and
Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier.
What?
I remember this one. If you like old Western kind of stuff, then you'll like the Davy Crockett movies.
Are we doing live action things?
I've been hitting the ones that we recognize. The ones
I don't
that
recognize.
we're talking about them. I'm skipping most of them, but we've hit a couple of them. Treasure Island was live action, so.
Any of the live action.
Yeah, I just mentioned the ones that I actually remember having. It's just like, okay, Lady and the Tramp.
Lady and the Tramp.
Lady and the Tramp is, like, everyone remembers this movie, but, like,
I remember parts
of
the
all
movie.
the old Disney movies that I just do not remember watching a second time. And it's not because it's not good, but, like, you just don't, it doesn't run through your head very often when you think of Disney movies.
You're talking Disney movies with your friend. It's not one you bring up, and it's like, there's moments you remember, like everyone remembers the kissing scene because it's been done a million times. I think remember
it's one of the most parodied scenes in Disney history.
I remember the parodies a little bit more than actually the scene.
Yeah,
like I can picture the scene clearly. It's the Lady and the Tramp, Meatball, and the guy with the
like
Italian
all I
stereotype.
remember in this film is there's a scene of the tramp walking through the streets. There's the spaghetti scene. And then the Siamese cats.
Oh.
We are Siamese, if you please. I'm like, yeah! Like, those cats are just...
I did like this a little bit more. But yeah, they create on you.
They're supposed to. Like, that's the hard thing about characters that are annoyingly... Like, characters built to piss you off, and it's like, It's a tricky one. I don't even know... Honestly, I feel like I don't remember enough about Lady and the Tramp to give it a verdict one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's nice to remember it. Like, I remember enough good stuff about it that I might go back and watch it sometime. But I don't remember it enough with authority to tell you whether or not you should watch it again or not.
I remember the sequel more than I truly remember the movie.
I remember Scamp's Adventure more than I had remembered.
Which is actually a good one. It doesn't
Scamp's Adventure ain't too bad.
For the sequel, for a Disney sequel, that was kind of rushed, and its sequels were, but it's a good sequel.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Old Yeller, spoiler alert, the dog dies. Moving on. I'm so sensitive. All right, we're getting to the fun ones. Sleeping Beauty.
I thought this was a lot older when remembering it.
1959.
It has...
Now, this one has come up in conversation a little bit because Maleficent is out, and full disclosure, neither of us have seen the movie. So far, I'm familiar briefly with the movie, only because one of the main writers on the film, the one responsible for the big controversial aspect of the movie, is one of the main writers from Batman Animated, and is one of my favorite TV writers of all time. But other than knowing that that's a part of it, I really don't have much to comment on it. But it's worth mentioning that a lot of people are thinking about Sleeping Beauty these days because of the fact that Maleficent just came out.
Sleeping Beauty is another one of those. As a whole, there's a lot of forgettable stuff, unfortunately. But when it gets really good, it gets really good.
Like, it feels like a movie that just takes forever to get to the point, but when it gets to the point, it's like...
That dragon, she finally becomes a dragon, and how the hell, the fire, the anime...
There's a reason that they chose Maleficent herself to be the focus of any continuation of this story. Because, as a whole, Sleeping Beauty feels like it's... Like, if you put a colon after this movie, it'd be Sleeping Beauty, the wait until Maleficent shows up.
Even, she's not just shows up, she's still in there in the part. Like, she's in there in the beginning, she does the
like,
cool...
her presence in this movie is, like, so much bigger than, like, any other aspect.
And her minions are all look really awesome and really... It's really dark. Like, the dark, really grainy green and purple mix and the browns. It's a really fun to look at movie. It's really beautiful. And there's parts in it like, oh, there's a king and there's a thing and the daughter and the prince and he does it. The prince is completely forgettable.
Oh, the prince is a piece of cardboard.
The Sleeping Beauties doesn't do anything. Well, obviously, because he's a part of the thing.
But even from that aspect...
Sorry, like, Aurora, not Sleeping Beauty.
Which, that point by itself is a major point towards what we're talking about. The fact that, like, I didn't even know until, like, 2 months ago Sleeping Beauty even had a name. That's, like, how insignificant this character is on the minds of...
I know that because Kingdom Hearts. Literally, that's why I know it.
There's more, like...
But every time you talk about it, they say Sleeping Beauty, because...
That's not to say that Sleeping Beauty is a cool movie that a lot of things came from.
Yeah.
But the movie, by itself, as itself... I can't recommend it unless you... Like I said, unless you're a big, like... Disney must see all of it, or you are really interested in comparing to, like, the old Maleficent, if you're a fan of the character in general, is a good reason to see it. The animation is beautiful. I mean, if you like it for that, it's that. That dragon.
I can recommend...
Oh, my goodness,
I can recommend it a little bit more because of the animation.
Yes.
And the story exists.
The story is pretty much... It feels like a movie where, like, a story is there to facilitate... ideas Walt had. He's like, it feels like, alright, I have this idea for, like, I feel like I want to make a movie that has, like, a really evil sorcerer witch in it, fight with a dragon, and a knight, and maybe a princess.
It's the most...
Does there happen to be a fairy tale out there that happens to contain these things? Oh, Sleeping Beauty, we'll just take those things and throw them at the Sleeping Beauty story, and then I can do that.
I think they're like, they need to do a thing. They pick Sleeping Beauty, and they're like, oh, what can they do with it? Oh, you can make these parts cool. But this movie feels older than it is. Because it's 59. This feels like, whenever I think of the timeline until I actually number, I place it near, like, Snow White and Pinocchio. Because it feels... old. It feels like they've been advancing through much, and like Lady and the Tramp, it feels really basic. Like the lady just falls asleep and has to be rescued by the prince, and it feels older. I think 59.
Part of that is I think it's just the changing of the years, because the Disney movies were taking longer to make. They were getting bigger budget, and they were spreading out a lot more. Because like the last one of even remotely this style was Peter Pan, and even Peter Pan was a lot more progressive than this style. And Lady and the Tramp, aesthetically, was ahead of its time, and like it felt extremely contemporary for 1955, which, yeah, if I had to come up with one good reason to recommend Lady and the Tramp, actually, as I can think of, is tone-wise, it is years ahead of its time. That is really cool about that movie. But Sleeping Beauty felt like they were trying to homage and move backwards towards the big fantasy prince and the castle and the princess and all that. For better or for worse. They were trying... You can debate that it was Disney did take a literal step backwards doing that. As a whole movie, I think that that's the way it is. The movie feels dated, and that's weird to say about a movie that came out in 1959.
Yeah. It's just... This is truly, I think, is the first disappointment for Disney. Like, the animation is beautiful, and you could watch the movie just on that part. But as a whole, I feel it's the first disappointment, which is sad.
Alright, well, I think what we're going to do is, my recording is getting about good here. We are going to take a brief break to cut off at the year 1960, going from the beginning to 1960, and in just a few minutes, we're going to swap out some stuff, and we're going to try out our next modern period. This podcast has been a lot of fun. By all means, if there is something that you guys would like us to just chew the fat about, or if there is a movie we brought up that you feel that you would be interested in us doing a longer segment, like really trying to break down, if there's like, hey, if you want to say, like, you really want us to look at Alice in Wonderland, or you really want us to look at, hopefully not Sleeping Beauty, but if there, if there's something you want us to really take a crack at, by all means, list it in the comments section. Till then, I am Ken Johnson, and this is Travis, and we will see you next time.